This happened about 10 years ago when I was 17. It was a Friday night and a friend was driving me home from a party. Neither of us had anything to drink, something I should clarify early. We turned into my street about 11 p.m. This street is a dead end and in a very bushy area with very minimal lighting, so it's quite pretty during the day, but just unsettling at night. And topping off the creepy factor was a swing that hung from a large tree in front of a house at the top of the street as you turn in. It had been there longer than I was born, and though it was quite rickety, it seemed functional. Having said that, I don't have any concrete memories of it being used in the past 5 or 10 years. I'd always joked about how creepy this swing was to people when we went past it, but this was even creepier because as we drove past tonight, there was a little girl sitting on it. She looked upset and just had her head hanging down, slowly swinging but not letting her feet off the ground. She slowly looked up as we passed and kind of gave a glare. She would have been no older than 8. And as unusual as it was for her to be out this late, my friend and I both assumed she'd had a fight with her parents and was sulking outside or something, and ultimately we really just didn't care enough or think it was that important at the time. My friend kept driving for another 15 seconds until we reached my house halfway down the street, about 250 meters from the swing. We stopped outside my driveway, facing the top of the street, but as often happened, we ended up sitting in the car chatting about school, girls, and that stuff that felt super deep and meaningful at that age. About 10 minutes into our conversation, we noticed some movement at the top of the street as the girl got off the swing and walked onto the middle of the road. She turned and started slowly walking toward us. As I mentioned, the street was dimly lit with only 3 street lamps between her and the car, which meant that for several seconds while she walked towards us, we couldn't see her, and she would emerge far closer than she had been before she stepped into the darkness. I drew attention to it and joked about how creepy it was. My friend laughed along. The ring had only come out a couple years prior, and the fact that she was pale and in a white dressing gown just accentuated it. Really, the only difference was her wispy blonde hair. As she emerged into the light of the second closest street lamp, about 100 meters away, the tone definitely changed. We were both still laughing, but it was definitely more nervous, and we were whispering, "Oh shit, oh Christ, oh fuck," as she got closer. It was far less funny because somehow, this little girl clearly wasn't a little girl. She was an adult woman, probably in her late 50s, early 60s. It was unmistakably the same person that was on the swing. We'd seen her get up off it. But it was as if she'd aged 50 years as she walked down the street towards us. She was clearly looking in our direction but squinting because of the car's headlights, so she probably couldn't see us directly. The woman was now about 20 meters away, and I could see her a lot more clearly in the car's headlights. She looked slightly haggard, and the outsides of her eyes were reddish as if she'd been crying or hadn't slept in a while. As she drew closer to us with each meter, I couldn't stop thinking, that was 100% a little girl 20 minutes ago. What the actual fuck? These were all thoughts I didn't verbalize at the time, but it was clear that we were both getting creeped out. When she was about 5 meters away, my friend turned the engine off, auto-locked the doors, and turned the headlights off. Continuing to nervously giggle, we slouched in our seats as the woman scowled in our direction, walking right past the car, mumbling something to herself. After about 5 seconds, we sat upright again, laughing at the situation now that we were more confident. It was just creepy and not dangerous. My friend commented she seemed drunk, which I accepted, and we continued to talk for a few minutes, but I was still somewhat unsettled. I didn't look back to see where the woman was, but I knew this was a dead-end street, and there was nowhere for that woman to have gone. I knew for a fact she didn't live in any of the houses that way, but hoped maybe she was just visiting or something. By this stage, my friend and I had shifted in our seats, so we were facing each other. Then suddenly, like a jump scare in a horror movie, I saw the woman quickly emerge from behind my friend's head and stare right at me through the driver's window. She cocked her head as if she was curious at my reaction, and leaned forward till her nose was almost touching the glass. "Fucking fuck!" I exclaimed, jumping and shaking the car. My friend's eyes and mouth went wide, and he slowly turned around, but by then she had stumbled about a meter away from the car, and was no longer looking at us, so it was far less disturbing to look at, all things considered. We sat in silence and just watched her continue to stumble off until she was in the gap of darkness between the first and second street light. Even after waiting about 5 minutes, we never saw her emerge, but we called it a night, me bolting from my car to my house, and my friend driving off at full speed with his doors locked. Since then, I've told a few people that story as a fun anecdote about how freaky my street is, and every time I pass that swing to this day, I think about it. I've reconciled that clearly we just didn't see the woman properly at first, and she wasn't the young 8-year-old we thought we saw. But then my friend and I still talk about it, and there's an underlying sense of, nah, we totally did see her every time.
Thank you for listening, my valued guests. If you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to like and subscribe so we may spend many more evenings together. If you have any questions or critiques, please put them in the comments below and follow me on social media, as I truly love interacting with you all. Good night, lovelies. Thank you for listening.